Welcome to Hey Listen, where we discuss faith, leadership, and the mission of the church. We're so glad you've joined us. Now to today's episode. All right, we're back, continuing our conversation on intelligent design and faith. Our first episode, we talked about creation and evolution, and just some resources on intelligent design. Today, we're going to jump right in to quantum physics.
All right, yeah. So quantum physics is the one thing that is absolutely ridiculous. It is the most difficult subject, I think, in the world today. Even those who are experts in it, when they try to describe what they're seeing and what their hypotheses are, it just blows your mind. It's even contradictory, it seems like. But what we're beginning to realize is that the classical view of physics, like I think Newton, I think Einstein, those men were looking at things on a macro scale. So they were formulating their theories, looking at the world and the universe, and the mathematics was pretty precise, very precise and incredible. But Einstein realized he lived just long enough to realize that those theories were breaking down when we went smaller. So when you go into the microscopic, those same principles should apply big to small, but they don't. And that's where the quantum physics started to change things. And so Einstein tried to bridge the gap between the two. He tried to come up with a unified kind of theory and died trying. He never was able to do it. So, what we're dealing with here is something so complex that Einstein wrestled with it to his dying day. So obviously, Kayla and Jeremy are not going to solve any of these issues, but we've talked about two books so far. We've talked about Douglas Axe and Undeniable, and we're really going to hit that heavy next time. Our last episode, we were really talking more about some of the philosophy stuff, which is the Stephen Meyer, the God hypothesis stuff. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit more, I'm quoting a little bit more from Believing is Seeing. This is a book by Michael Gillen, and the subtitle here is Rethinking What Science Can and Cannot Do. And then I would also say what we have going on, maybe that's what I said. I need to back off that. I think that's my take on what he's saying. Also, I would say how I think quantum physics is really humbling modern science and changing the game. So I've already kind of talked about, okay, when we talk about physics, used to, before, about 1900, we just didn't have the ability to look far enough down into, with microscopes and things of that nature. And then at about that time, a lot of German physicists in particular, it seems like they were always German, they started to come up with these theories, Schrodinger and others, and they were totally changing the game. And Einstein struggled with that. He kind of pushed against it. But let me just explain a little bit here. I'm just going to give some basic principles that quantum physics is stating that just can blow our minds. So quantum physics has proven that something can exist and not exist at the same time, that something can get from here to there, like 2 points from A to B, without actually traveling from here to there. In other words, a particle can be here and on the other side of the universe at the same time. That's what they say. Something can be nothing and everything at the same time. That light is both a particle and a wave. And that one we can maybe deal with a little bit. So this was where people like Newton and others started to realize that there was something very strange going on in the universe when they started to try to describe light. Now, right now, we have this, I don't know what it is. It's this amazing contraption above us. It's shining light on. It's got all this fancy stuff. But basically, every day when we open our eyes, we're interacting with light. The truth is, light is one of the most mysterious things in the universe. It is both a wave and a particle. It shouldn't be that. It should be one or the other. And as scientists try to define what light is, it's a rabbit hole. It just never seems to end. And so now there's light, and then there's all this conversation in physics today about dark matter. And so it really isn't something as simple as light is not simple at all, which then, we being people of faith, Kayla,
Right.
God is light.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So there you have it. Like right there in the scriptures aren't trying to be scientific,
Right.
but they're making an observation here that makes us say, okay, wait a second. Life in the universe is far more complicated than we realized. Yeah. And that's okay. That's all right. So let me just say this, though. Here in our faith, Kayla, you and I have a faith that says some things that are to the world pretty crazy. Like Jesus is fully God and fully man. We believe that he is both immortal and has flesh.
Right.
Okay. That the whole idea of Jesus' resurrection. Even our teachings, the first shall be last. Or love your enemies. The meek shall inherit the earth. Now, philosophically, what I've just described in all of those things, antinomy is a philosophical word. And here's the definition of antinomy: a contradiction between conclusions which seem equally logical, reasonable, or necessary. Or another way to describe it is two things that you say that appear to contradict themselves, and yet they both seem to be true. So the things I just told you about from our Christian faith,
right,
and the things I just told you that are basic premises of quantum physics fit that category. They state opposite things, and yet they seem to be equally true. So let's just call time out because our brains are hurting right now, right?
Sure.
And let's just say this is where, again, in our last episode, I advocated for humility. It doesn't matter how smart we are. It doesn't matter how good we can handle logic and propositions in logic. The world is so complicated, and we need to stop every once in a while and just say, okay, it's all right that we may never be able to figure all of this out. And I think this is one of the ways that we as people of faith, I think we're a little better geared for quantum physics because it's okay. Like, we know God is so much bigger than us. We accept these things a little by faith.
Sure.
Right? And I think a scientist would say, well, I just can't do that. I have to have proof. Well, quantum physics is going to mess with your mind then, because it just will not, even trying to understand light. If you say, well, I'm only going to believe in it if it's scientific and scientifically provable and that kind of, that's fine. But open your eyes, look at light, and all of a sudden you're stumped.
Sure.
And God just has a way of humbling us in that way. And so I think it's important as we have these conversations that we say, okay, like in this episode, we're not trying to really talk about the specifics of quantum physics as much as we're saying this is a really good illustration. Just the whole field of quantum physics is challenging scientific assumptions that were rock solid in Darwin's day. If we go back to the 1800s, even the early 1900s, we say, okay, wow, like everything is shifted in less than 100 years. And so that tells me, let's soak it up. Let's learn as much as we can. Let's take this knowledge as far as it can go. And what we're going to discover is that, again, like we said last time, there's more questions than answers.
Sure. Absolutely.
And ultimately, all of us, even the scientist, has to land somewhere by faith. So if you listen to a really good scientist giving a paper, they won't mean to do this, but every once in a while, or in a lecture that you'll watch online, they'll come to a point where they say, okay, I'm looking at all this data. I believe what it's pointing to is, okay, right there, from a scientific perspective, they've leaped out of science and into
it's a
faith,
perspective,
into an opinion, into this is my best guess.
Yeah.
It is just absolutely wild when you realize, and you can't like criticize the person for doing that, because when we're trying to do research, if you've ever done any serious research on a doctoral level, you put all of, I spent a year studying my subject, which was death and resurrection, funerals, and that kind of thing, fun stuff, right? But you spend a whole year reading all of these books and putting all of this information down, and then you make a statement. You say, okay, all the data is leading me in this direction, and these are my reasons. This is how I'm going to back up that thesis statement. But even there, after all that research, you come to a point and say, this is what I think is the best approach or methodology. This is what I think the data points to. And you're going to shrug your shoulders to some extent. You've done your work. You've done the best you can. But you probably know that someone's going to come behind you, look at that same data, and then see new data and come up with different conclusions. That's what research does. Research is rarely an end to itself. We rarely get to the point where we say, okay, we figured out life, the universe, and everything, which that's a Douglas Adams quote, by the way. Anybody that knows Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy will recognize that. But that's not true. Douglas Adams is so funny. He was a secular. He's a British writer. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I've heard of it.
Anyway. Yeah. So he's really funny because he makes fun of people of faith, but he also kind of makes fun of scientists too.
Okay.
Like he laughs at the fact that scientists are trying to figure out life, the universe, and everything, and he knows they can't do it. And so anyway, in the book, he has these people on a journey, and it's funny stuff, but they're trying to find purpose. And they see the limitations, even of advanced cultures and advanced knowledge. At the end of the day, everybody's kind of in the same boat. They're in a fallen universe where things go bad and things go wrong. And so I read that when I was like 12 or 13, probably shouldn't have been doing that. But, even now looking back at books like that, like so many people in the world today are trying to make sense out of this world. Yeah. And really, honestly, I don't think there's any way to make sense out of the complexity of the universe.
Unless there's a God. And I was thinking, as you were talking, it's like the more we discover, the more we just discover what we don't know, or how much more we don't know, and how true that is, even in our faith, even as, people who are growing in their faith and have this solid foundation. I feel like the more we dive into scripture and the more we listen to truth from, wise people around us, the more I just realize, wow, there's still so much I just don't know. Yeah. And there's beauty in that. If we ever get to the point where we say, I've figured it out, like that's probably where real tragedy is coming. But we have so much just freedom and growing in our faith, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I and this is a little off topic, but I always tell people one of the things that I would like to see the church rediscover is a sense of mystery, even when it comes to our worship. What we don't realize, Kayla, is we're shaped by worldviews in ways that we're blind to it. So, for instance, when I travel in Europe, I love going to see medieval art and things of that nature. I'm strange. The medieval period fascinates me. The reason it fascinates me is because it's pre-Enlightenment and pre-scientific age. And so the people in that age were much more open to the mystery of God and to the mysterious nature of the universe and life. When you get past the Enlightenment time period, you have this switch in worldview where people start to, because of science, which is a good thing, they try to rationalize things and figure everything out. And everything that's good is something that we can figure out and know. Well, before that time period, the medievalists the people in the medieval period had to just accept things by faith. They didn't have those scientific facts. Well, obviously, I've already stated, I see great value in science. But one of the problems is that when we are only thinking scientifically and rationally, then we think that we can figure even God out. And so I would say in worship, one of the most important things is for us to embrace the fact that God is mystery. I forget who said it, but someone said, we embrace God as mystery or we embrace him not at all. It's one of the German thinkers, I think, said that. I would say for science, the same thing. I think the very best scientists need to be the ones who are absolutely thrilled by the mystery. But it seems like in science, we get discouraged when there's more questions than answers. Sure. But I would say it's okay. Like that's the facts on the ground, as it were.
Right.
And what we see is that we can never learn all the facts on the ground. There's always it's like we pick up a rock and underneath is a whole new universe under that. And then we pick up another rock and there's another whole universe under that, and we go, okay. This is amazing. This is a mind that has put this together that is so much deeper and greater than my mind. So what I would say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I would say we need to, as modern Western thinkers, American thinkers, humans in the world today, in our context, I think it is great for us in our worship to go back to saying, wow, God is mysterious. Let's
sit in the unknowns a little bit.
Let's just dwell in that. But I would also say when we go to class, when we send our kids to school, when we're, and a handful of our kids are going to go off and study in universities and be able to really learn some fascinating things, don't go and learn thinking that you're going to figure it all out. Go with an attitude that you're going to appreciate the mystery. I think that is a major shift in how people think. I was trained, and you were too, whether you realize it or not, we realize it or not. We were trained to sort of think that if we study enough and we work hard enough, we can kind of figure everything out.
We'll arrive at some point.
Yeah, and the Enlightenment thinkers, they believe that man was the measure of all things. And they even to today, there are people who believe that all the problems of the world, even death, will be solved by human thought and human thinking and science and progress. It's just not true. Like, I don't think we can outthink sin. I don't think we can outthink death. Almost every couple of months, if you have a news feed, you'll see some scientists saying, "Oh, we figured out how to defeat death. We're going to harvest organs, and we're going to replace your organs as you go along," and crazy stuff like that. There was an article a few weeks ago about the leader of China and then Russia, Putin. They were having a conversation with Hot Mike, caught them talking about that, like this putting organs in their body, like to extend their lives or whatever. Like they think that's one of the ways that they can defeat death. And it's just like, oh my goodness, what a crazy thing. And so instead of accepting, it is appointed unto man once to die, and then comes the judgment, as the writer of Hebrews tells us. These men are like, I'm going to do everything I can to fight it off. Well, no one has figured that out yet. In all these years, no one has figured it out yet. And to think that we will be able to defeat death on our own. And this is where our faith comes in. Revelation 1 tells us we don't have to defeat death. Jesus has already done that. And the whole idea of our faith is that we're looking at the same world as the materialist. And we're saying, I'm going to die. And to me, that's what, when I'm talking to people about faith, at some point we need to get into that conversation. So what happens when you die? What happens when I die? And science and materialism have no answer for that other than Darwin's answer is we become worm food. He literally, that was his, and he wrote a book later after Origin of the Species on worms, and it's like one of the best ever written, as I understand it. I'm not a worm, reader. I don't read about worms, but I think earthworms were a big deal to him. That was something that he really was fascinated with. But that basically, that's what the materialist is going to tell you. There was a commercial that was on. It was playing all the time years ago, like during Super Bowls and stuff like that, and had this grumpy grandpa. And the little kid says, "Grandpa, what happens when you die?" "You get buried. They stick you in the ground, or whatever." And it was kind of funny. It's just a grumpy old grandpa. So it wasn't meant to be a statement on philosophy or science, but actually it is. I mean, if you don't have God, that is the answer. That's the best you got.
Yeah.
And when we're talking to people, when I'm visiting with someone who's lost a loved one and isn't a believer, they're not a believer, what do you say? I mean, what answer do they have?
Right.
They can talk about the past, but there's no hope in the present, and there's no hope for a future.
Yes.
And so that's the thing. What really makes me sad is when people who have a scientific worldview are just so boastful and arrogant and proud. For what? Like, you're going to die. I'm going to die. You don't have an answer. I think Jesus gave us an answer.
Absolutely.
And so I'm not going to boast about that. I didn't do it. Jesus did it. But I find it interesting that those individuals want to laugh at me and belittle my faith, but they don't have anything to hold on to. And the problem with that worldview, the problem with a materialistic worldview is, if there is only the world, there is no God. Nietzsche put it well. He said, if there is no God, all things are possible or permissible, depending on how you translate it. Hitler took that for real. Stalin took that for real.
Sure.
They doubled down on that. And so those are extreme examples. Everybody today is going to call you Hitler if they don't agree with you. Or really, Stalin is he's evil too. Okay, guys. But the reality is both of those worldviews were informed by materialism. So let's just say this conversation we're having about faith and science, it has consequences, Kayla. Like if our kids, are interacting with this and and they go down the direction of materialism, it's not just that it doesn't have an answer for what happens when you die. It actually has an answer for what happens when you live. Yeah. And the answer is ugly. If the most important thing is the good life now, if you've got something I want, I'll take it from you if it makes my life better.
Right.
So all of a sudden, I have to start making calculations according to what can make my life better. And that may be at your expense. And so clearly, that's what materialism does. It drives us to a position where we're selfish and we're hateful and even murderous to get what we want. And so let's not act like these philosophies don't have consequences, because they do. And, when we look at quantum physics and other things like that, that to me, I'll just give one example here as we're wrapping things up. So quantum physics, one of the things that they've noted is that, so the in the cell, we know from, again, basic biology, that there's a nucleus and, there's protons and neutrons, and then there's electrons that kind of, float around that. Now that's our theory. We can't really know for sure what's going on at that level, but that's the theory, and it's a workable theory. But we call these things electrons, and we know that they're there. So electrons, your body is filled with them. But what's funny is that even though we're looking at each other and, we have bodies and what looks like solid, every single cell has space in it. It's not all solid. There's space within that. And the electrons are floating around the nucleus. And those electrons, if I understand this correctly, and again, I'm sure someone can call me out on this, scientists are saying now that electrons seem to be, their lifespan is like eternal. Like they put a time on it, but it's so many, so far out there that you might as well just, what they're saying is they're eternal. So just think about that. Even if you don't believe in anything beyond the grave, there are things in your body right now, these electrons, that are eternal. So what that tells me is when I read the Bible and it says God is light, when I read a scientific explanation of electrons and they say they last forever, all of a sudden things are starting to match up here.
Right.
And I'm thinking, okay, in me is something eternal. There is eternity in me. Yeah. So what does resurrection life look like? Well, is it possible that God not only knows how to create matter, but he knows how to create matter that is eternal or resurrection life? So now all of a sudden I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, like part of what we're dealing with when we talk about death and resurrection, there's an element here where maybe quantum physics can help us at least begin to say, okay, that actually fits. Like the world we're in, there's something going on the quantum level that is, for all intent and purposes, we can call it eternal. And so now that opens up a conversation of, okay, what does it mean to exist? What does it mean to think, to be a sentient being? And we have that answer in the Bible. We're made in the image of God,
right?
And that's what makes humans different than anything else that we have found in creation, is that we have this ability to think and reason. But I would say that it also it proves that there's something very unique that God has done in a human being. As we're wrapping up here, let me give you the example. I think it was C.S. Lewis that talked about how, maybe it was Lewis, I forget, but he brought up the point that we're all made of this stuff that's always kind of like cycling out. So I think science tells us that every cell in our body kind of cycles out every 7 years. And when that happens, of course, we age and all those things. But Kayla, in 7 years, you'll still be Kayla, Lord willing. And in 7 years, Jeremy will still be Jeremy.
Right.
So from a material sense, nothing that's sitting here today in these two chairs, and your chair and this couch, will be here. And yet we will be here.
Here we are. Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah.
So, like, how does science describe that? And now that's at the RNA, that's the DNA, that's, we understand that cells replicate and all that kind of thing. But just the mystery of that, like, if you're a materialist, how do you explain that?
Right.
And so that's where we say science can only take us so far. They can help us understand what's happening in the material sense. But it doesn't really describe how I remain sentient, how I remain, like, I have memory. I can remember 7 years ago. I am who I am. I've grown and developed. I've failed and succeeded. And so that's where we say, okay, science, you can't explain that. You have to draw a line somewhere. And that's where some of the mystery comes in.
Yeah. So my mind is just swimming in so many thoughts. But just as we're wrapping up, thinking through a couple things, here's what's going on in my mind. The one side of, I'm so glad that we are at Ridgecrest really intentional to teach foundational truths and to take them further. And then I know that this will air after the fact, but a week from today, I'll be on an airplane going to Lesotho. And just thinking through these foundational truths that are cross-cultural.
Yes.
And many of the kids that will have an opportunity, and adults for that matter, will be hearing some of these truths for the first time. And the beauty in whether we're sharing the basic foundational truths or these deep, helping them understand what, how God created us and that purpose. I said it, I think in the last episode, for a purpose, on purpose and for a purpose.
Right.
Not only were we created, but everything he created. But my brain is just swimming through just all of those truths that we have an opportunity and an obligation to share with those around us.
Right. And I want to make it very clear that what we're advocating for here today, when we go to Lesotho, we're not going to be talking about quantum physics. No. And I'm going in January. I don't know if you know that.
You?
Yeah, I'll be on the January trip.
Wonderful.
It'll be my first time there in Lesotho. But I know that these aren't the conversations we're having there. We're going to have the more fundamental conversations about God and the spiritual world, because in their worldview, it's not a scientific worldview.
Right.
But I want to make this very clear, and I'm going to quote Douglas Axe here. He says, "Harm comes to science not by people hoping to find a particular result, but by people trying to suppress results that go against their hopes." Here's what I want to challenge Christians to realize. Do not be afraid of science. Do not be afraid of philosophy. Do not be afraid of knowledge, because pursue it as far as you want to. I don't think it will ever disprove God. But the problem is when a scientist approaches the subject of life and they've automatically ruled out the intelligent design possibility, they automatically rule out design. So as they're looking at results, they're going to reject any of the results that don't match their worldview. So as Christians, we've been accused sometimes of not being thoughtful or thinking Christians, but I want to just advocate. That's what this series is about. Again, I know some of the science maybe hasn't been spot on. I didn't want to get into the weeds of that. I could have been more specific in some areas. But the idea is this. Don't be afraid to have these conversations. Read this stuff, learn it, learn everything, go as deep as you can in it, because we're not, as Christians, we are encouraged, I think, in the Word to dig as deep as we can into the world we live in, and as deep as we can into theology and who God is. And so if we do that, I think we will in the end be able to win hearts to Jesus, because we are seekers of truth.
Absolutely. I'm excited. Our next conversation will end this series talking about pond scum.
Sounds exciting.
I cannot wait.
Yeah, pond scum's great.
Thank you again for joining us today. We'll see you next time on Hey Listen.